Mm.
Are you all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
I will talk to you of art, for there is nothing else. Some artist made a hook.
Yes.
Let you bite upon it.
Classy. And now, without further ado,
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Planet Shivers Podcast. This is Albert Shivers, and on this episode, we're going to jump right in to my conversation with the special guest on this episode, Bill Medei. I have a lot of exciting news for you about the website and about some new artwork that I have cooking, and a little bit of a new philosophy that I've been growing in terms of me and my art and all that existential BS. It's a little bit long-winded, so I'm going to save it for the next episode. I am going to try for 2 episodes this week. We'll see if I can pull it off. But in the meantime, let's get to my conversation with the one and only Bill Medei. And at the end of the podcast, we'll be hearing a clip of a piece of Bill Medei's music that we talk about during the show. But the clip of the music will be at the end, so hang on until the end and hear some music. Alright, folks, welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers Podcast. I am, and always will be, Albert Shivers. And today on the episode, I'm excited to have on musician Bill Medei. Thanks so much for coming on, being on the show.
Albert, I have to add a little caveat there on your introduction to me. Musicians don't really think of me as a musician. They think of me as a comic. Okay. And comedians think of me as a farting ice hole. So I'm really nowhere in between. Okay. So, but I'm having a lot of fun. Just to give you a little background for people who don't know me.
Yeah.
When I came out of the service, I was drafted during the Vietnam era. And I came out in 73, late 73. And I was asked by my church to host a coffee house about a year later, not even that. And I hosted I had a separate little room down in Quakertown, Society of Friends, which most people call Quakers. And I hosted there at a little building that they gave me to use on Thursday night, I guess it was. I'm not sure of that. But once night a week, and I tried to get people into play and served coffee and danishes and those kind of things and had a conversation with people. And I did that for a while, and I decided that I might get better results with an open mic. So, like 1974, I started hosting open mics. And I put on a local guy who still remembers it, a guy named Craig Thatcher. I put him on when he was like 14 years old. First time he ever played in front of people. And today, Craig Thatcher fills a lot of rooms in the Lehigh Valley. He's got a big audience with his guitar work and his singing. He's a respected musician in the area. In fact, he works for Martin Guitar as a representative of Martin. So he's doing pretty well, and I'm happy for his success. But somebody once figured out, like at one point I had like 3 open mics a week back in the years. I call them the years. Those were the years when Baby Bush was president, so they were like there was a lot of like we're declaring war, and let's have a war based on 3 phony reasons that all came out to be phony, but it was never investigated at all. Not one dime was spent compared to the millions that were spent investigating Hillary and Benghazi. So you know where my politics are, at least. Yeah. I'm a strongly political person. I've always been interested in history, and I've became a history teacher. That's why I'm a bit didactic in my approach here. But I'm having fun, and that's the main thing about life to me. You notice you haven't had to say one damn word to me yet, have you?
No.
No.
I have them queued up.
Okay, go ahead. Say something.
To jump back into your story a little bit, where are you from?
I was originally from this area.
Okay.
I grew up and graduated from Hellertown High School.
Okay.
I took a job that took me down to Philly and then eventually up to New York City area. I lived in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Okay.
Worked in a town called Garfield, which is down the road from Teaneck. And after about 30 years, my company said, Bill, we have a great idea. We just came up with it. We hired this guy half your age for about half your wage, and we're going to save a lot of money. And thank you for starting up the New York City branch of our company, but we really don't need you anymore. So at like 56 years old, I was thrown out on my ass. And, that's the kind of gratitude you get for when you start a whole division of your company up. I built it up from one guy doing a one-man stand up to like 7 or 8 employees,
Right.
with billing about $800,000 a year for my company, and that wasn't enough to keep me employed. So they hired a kid, and I think a lot of that was due to problems with my insurance, because when you get older in a company, your insurance rates go up because you have to run higher and higher risks. And so I was ruining the insurance, and there were a handful of guys that were older than me, but they were all in the main office, and I wasn't in the main office, so I became an expendable, you see. And so that's what rules a lot of small companies today. But, yeah, troubles with insurance. What they used to call the death panels. You know, that if Obama comes in, we're going to have death panels. The truth is, insurance does not cover a lot of things. So that if you got a problem, and so there are their own death panels. Mm-hmm. You know, insurance companies will tell you can't have that operation because you're not qualified for it yet. Things have to get much worse for you to be qualified. That's the freaking death penalty right there. Mm-hmm. That's a death panel that capitalism imposes on us, okay? But when society does it, it's a huge crime. But when capitalism does it, hey, it's just a matter of facts, you know? The numbers are not there yet, so we're not going to do it. We're not going to give you money. So insurance business is, a friend of mine who used to work for an insurance company, he says, the insurance men have a license to steal. And I didn't know what he meant until years later when insurance became negative in my life. So it's one of those things. Anyway, Albert, go ahead. Give me your next question.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you were drafted.
Yes.
Would you mind going into that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I was drafted on my last year of eligibility. I was drafted on my last month of eligibility. Wow. And had I been able to get through December, I would have been ineligible for the draft. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get through. My number was 137. So it was right. They told you if you were in the first 100, the odds are that you're going to go. If you were in above 200, the odds are minimal. Mm-hmm. But if you're between 100 and 200, you don't know. So the whole odds thing that they did with the lottery didn't help me out because I was in the middle of the lottery. So I went, and and they made me a conscientious objector because I refused to hold a gun in Vietnam. So they taught me how to be a medic, and I had a lot of fun jumping around, putting bandages on people and stuff, practicing. I saw some of the world's worst training films that I'm trying to find again on YouTube. One was called the U.S. Army Medical Corps in Vietnam, and it was narrated by Jack Webb. Remember Jack Webb at all? He was the guy. He was the voice of the cop show that they had, Dragnet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful show. The movie started out of a B-52 flying over the jungles and dropping bombs, and there's this real cool jazz. The U.S. Army Medical Corps in Vietnam. And these bombs are going and they're making like really colorful explosions in the jungle and spreading out like bullseyes across through the jungle, and you see greenery being ripped to shreds in front of you from 2,000 feet in the air, and it was a real cool thing. And then you got to see people who were wounded. There's a phone call. Is that me?
It's right behind you, I think.
Oh.
Milady, leap, milady, Sie hat no lieb, milady, milady, frozen fruit products for you. Cheese blintzes, apple, cherry, blueberry, and strawberry, dumplings and potato latkes too.
Where were we?
We were just wrapping up talking about Vietnam and the training film.
The training film. Yeah. I saw horrific things, and I sat there. I was in a class of about 45 people, guys, they took us to see a movie after we had all of our training. This is the last couple of days of training. They sat us down in a classroom, and the instructor says, "All right," he says, "this is a movie to get you to be being used to, so you don't panic when you see somebody actually shot in front of your face."
Okay.
He says, "Now, here's the problem. A lot of you guys are going to vomit because it's so violent. If you have to vomit, you do not vomit on my floor." You got to understand, that's the mentality of a drill instructor.
Yeah.
He says, "You leave the room, go through that door, and vomit in the grass outside. Don't come back in here. You stay out there." So about 45 started the movie. I was one of 3 that actually got to see the whole movie and refused to vomit. But everybody else was outside, and there was all these horror shows of like actual battlefield cameras walking behind soldiers, like walking through rice paddies, and you see the bomb goes off. Some soldier steps on a field bomb, like a landmine, they call it. Anyway, and the camera goes up into the sky really quick and then comes back down, and the soldier that was right in front of the cameraman is laying down in the rice paddy, and a medic comes over to him and picks up his leg, and there's a boot on the end, and there's a knee. And right where his calf muscle used to be is nothing. There's just the tibia and the fibia exposed to the air. And he's lifted it up, and his leg has been blown off.
Right.
And so it was like, oh, Christ, that sent some guys out. And then there were shots of guys, and all of these guys were 18 and 19 years old. Right. The average person that lost their life was 19 in Vietnam. Okay. Think of that. That means it was mostly 18 and 19-year-old kids going over there to get their brains blown out.
Yeah.
And, they never got a chance. They never really got started. You raise a kid. You government, you're trying to do what's right for the government, for society, because government is supposed to be society. Not a few rich people at the top of society, but all of society is government. That's what government is supposed to be in theory. But we're finding out that that's not true. And we're finding out that Korea and Vietnam and Iraq, all these wars were fought hopefully to hold down the bad guys, but they were all incursions into other people's land. And when you invade somebody else's land, they don't care what your motives are. They know that you're a foreign enemy on the land that they grew up in.
Right.
And if you can't get them to see that you're trying to help them, then you failed. You have failed. Not the people that were invading us. America has failed consistently in the last 50, 60 years of invading foreign lands. So, but somebody's making money out of it. The military budget is in the trillions every year.
Yeah.
But if you question that, you're not patriotic. You're just not patriotic. You need to leave this country. And that, to me, is a huge hoax.
Yeah. So you said it quick before, and I didn't catch exactly what it was called, but your decision to be a medic rather than hold a gun.
Right. That's called conscientious objector.
Okay.
And that's still inactive. It's still active in our service. But today, our service is entirely voluntary, so there's very few conscientious objectors.
Yeah.
So people that go into the medic training business, the fields that learn that are doing it consciously. They're doing it for a future in medicine. You can learn a lot. The Army is a great teacher. They have great books. They have great. They're really concerned. They're really a social organization. In fact, they're the most socialized organization in the world. And it's the funniest thing. All these people that wave the flag so hard and heavy are furiously waving the flag. Love the military, the American military. The American military keeps you is socialized from cradle to grave. You're fed, you're housed, everything you do, you don't pay for. Whatever you want, you can pay out of casual money, but your food and your everything you do, once you're an officer, even your automobiles are given to you. You're an executive now. And so that whole business is the most socialized way of life. And yet, that's the people we admire when the war comes, because these people are sacrificing themselves for us. But it's the curious thing about how we love the military, but that's pure socialism. You wear your rank on your sleeve. You got your name on your shirt, Everybody walks around with dog tags and names and ranks. You know exactly. You look at a guy, you know exactly how much money he's making every year. That's the ultimate form of socialism, pal. I'm sorry. And it just boggles me. Another one of the many inequities of our life.
Right. I
was dragged because the Vietnam War needed people to put up in the front lines. So They started a draft because, the draft was continuing. The draft started actually in World War II, and they needed people to fight, the Nazis and the Axis powers, and it never stopped. Right after World War II ended, Korea started up, and then Vietnam. So there was a constant need for soldiers, and the draft kept continuing.
But did you choose the medic route?
The medic route was handed to me when I declared myself a conscientious objector, a CO.
Okay.
They said, okay, you have to become a medic. You have no option.
Okay.
The medic is the only guy that doesn't carry a gun. He's supposed to be protected by the other men in his unit. So, and his job is to go out there and haul the wounded back to the back of the line again. And the problem in Vietnam was there was no back line. There was hard fighting every day, and you walk through the jungle trying to establish something called an L zone or a kill zone, and you surround. You get off a helicopter and go out into the jungles, establish a kill zone, and wait for a crew of Viet Cong to walk into it, and then you open fire on them and kill them. And then when you got done with that, you walk back to where the landing zone was for the helicopter, and while you were walking out to establish your kill zone, you were eligible to walk into one of their kill zones, and they did the same things to us. And what really pissed off a lot of soldiers is you'd fight like the Dickens all day, and kill a lot of people and watch your buddies get killed in front of you, and then you would get back on the helicopter and leave the land you just fought for, and leave it, and so like you got eventually. Every soldier realized, I'm fighting for nothing. I'm fighting what they called at the time was a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. And I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk.
We can move. Yeah,
I want to talk about creativity and art and what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to take basically what society has given me, which has given me a pretty good life. As much as people, I sounded like someone that hates America. I love America, and America has given me a great life, and I have a family. I have 2 kids, adult kids, and I want to give something back now that I'm retired. Right. I played the game. I put aside money from my daily things, and I'm living off the money I saved. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm not wealthy, but I have enough. I have enough to put 3 meals on, and 3 hots in a cot, they call it. Mm-hmm. You know, I know where my next meal's coming from, and I have a pretty good collection of musical gear that I like to play with, and I've been lucky. I've been luckier than most people on this earth, and I'd like to pass something along to the next generation. I like to talk to kids and maybe give them some ideas as to why they don't want to fuck with drugs, you know? Okay. I saw a lot of people my age that I thought were absolutely brilliant, Albert, brilliant musicians that got sucked into taking drugs. Okay, a la Keith Richards and a whole bunch of other people who were assigned to come up with the next big hit album, or the big hit 45, or whatever you want to call it, single. They were told you have to come up with something. What you did last year doesn't matter anymore. You got to do something this year, pal. Mm-hmm. And so they constantly kept coming up with new songs, and a lot of them resorted to heroin, put their life on the line to come up with new material. Right. My goal is, this is important to me. My goal is to provide other ways to create, stimulate creativity. And I think the true creativity comes from being in the presence of other creative people. I think there's a contagion to creativity. Okay. Just like when you go to church or when you go to see a movie, there's a contagion effect that takes place in the audience. The whole audience gets swept up in the same thing, and when you feel other people starting to cry for a sad scene, you start crying too. Yeah. That's contagion. When you feel joy, that's contagion, you know? Mm-hmm. And, everybody starts jumping and clapping their hands. That's contagion, you know? And that's a very powerful technique for our human behavior. We are basically herd animals. There's a few of us that are raptors. We don't like to call them that, but that's what they are. They're the raptors, and the herd protects the weak. They put the weak in the middle of the herd, and the strong are walking around the outside. And when a raptor comes in to the herd, thinking, lunch, let's eat, he comes in as fast and as hot as he can, and he's going to grab something that looks lame on the inside of the herd. So he starts flying or walking in or running in or whatever they do to motivate, and looking at something old or something very young that can't walk anymore, or never did walk or whatever, something lame that he can easily outrun. And all of a sudden, something walks in front of him that's even lamer than the target he's looking at. One of the herd is even lamer, and thought, oh my God, look at that one, can't eat, and he's got a lot of meat on his bones. I'm going to go after him. So the raptor shifts gears and starts chasing the lame one.
Right.
That's just appeared in front of him, and suddenly the lame one shifts gears and is off like Speedy Gonzales.
Right.
And the raptor realizes, fuck, I've just been tricked. You know, and that lame one was never really lame, just feigning it, because the job of that person or that being was to get me off the track of my original target. And that's how the herd protects the weak ones in the center. And that's what people need to do. We need to protect the very young and the very old, and the sick ones, and the ones that have trouble walking or trouble talking or whatever they have trouble. We need the well ones need to protect the sick ones, because eventually all of us get old. Eventually, and you were protected when you were young, so you need to pass that along, pass that sense of righteousness along, because you wouldn't have been born had you been, or no, that's true. You would have been born, but you would have been killed as a baby had the herd not protected you. So you need to interact with that herd. You have to, out of justice. The water is especially good. How you enjoying your water today?
I am.
Good.
I'm
having
some
a
good
time.
water. I don't often have Bethlehem water.
Well, this is not actually Bethlehem water.
Okay.
I used to work in the water filtration business, so I know how to filter water. And this is filtered water. Even the ice cubes are filtered. So I'm very happy with it.
Even better.
The secret of filtration is to just change the filter out. What happens with all filters is they become saturated. And when a filter becomes saturated, you got a real serious problem, because now it starts shedding its dirt, and it sheds the dirt faster than the water coming in. So the filter acts as a dirt maker instead of a dirt taker. Okay, and it's making the water worse once it saturates it, and the water coming out is worse. So you have to put a date on each filter and make sure you change it and set up a program to change it on time. Because once a filter becomes saturated, especially with bacteria, it can really shed a lot of nasty things that make you sick. So that's important. Yeah. That's the only thing I learned from all my years of filtration. And now I just told it to you in 20 seconds. Yeah. How about that? A whole lifetime of selling water filters.
Secrets out. With all the art forms that there are out there, what attracted you to music? What led you down the road of music?
Oh, my goodness. I'll tell you what, that's an easy story for me because I remember it vividly. I was in a car with my mother, and she was driving. I couldn't drive yet. I was a teenager. And the local radio station played a song by the Rolling Stones called It's All Over Now. And by about halfway through the song, I was really dancing. I really got my youthful testosterone going. I felt it flowing. I felt, wow, this guitar is like a rip-roaring, powerful guitar. And it had just the right reverb and just crunchy reverb. Wow, that's a powerful sound. That sounds like sex must feel. I had that realization. And and the disc jockey that was playing it that day got to the end of the song. My mother was parking the car at that point, and got to the end of the song and said, "Man, that song sounded so good. I'm going to play it again." Now, disc jockeys are never supposed to play the same song twice, but he did it because he loved it. He got into the mood, and I was cheering him on. Yeah, play it again. And he played it again, and my mother didn't want to sit in the car the whole time. So I said, "Okay, Mom, go into the store. I'll find you in the store. I'll turn the car off and come in and find you when So she did that, and I listened to the whole song, and I was dancing on my ass the whole time, dancing. I was 14 or 15, and everything was rippling through my veins, new hormones. It was all so good. And I said, I want to do this forever. And so I learned to play rock and roll as a substitute for the sex act, for the act of procreation, what we lovingly, endurely call fucking. Okay? I wanted to do that forever. And sometimes when I'm on stage and playing, I get that contagion going with the crowd, and it's almost, well, it is. It's as good as sex, maybe even better, because there's no wet spot afterward, you know? Nothing to clean up. It's all good. And so I really enjoy playing for people. And I enjoy the act of creativity. And I wanted to see if I could find ways to make people creative without risking their life on heroin. Mm-hmm. And so I do this, and I put people on stage, and from one point I was putting people on stage 3 times a week at various clubs. I've done clubs all over the Lehigh Valley, and some person somewhere sat down and estimated that I put over 60,000 people on stage so far in my life. And not different people, they're, you know, but I've introduced people 60,000 times based on a rough average of like at least 20 people a night, you know, every night 3 times a week for a long time. So that's good. I'm having a lot of fun with my life, and people think of me as a hero of sorts, and I'm not a hero. All I do is dial in some knobs, okay? Mm-hmm. And try to make people as sound as best as my PA system will allow me to do it.
Right.
And they like that. People like that. And I make some hard decisions sometimes, and usually most people will go with the decision to extend a performer because the performer is doing so well. Sometimes they get mad and storm out. That happens, I think, in every, like, how come you put them up for 20 minutes and I only got 10 for me? And, you know, that's hard to explain. But I try to reward people who get the audience involved. And I try to tell people that, listen, if you're crucifying my audience, I have to protect them too. And you know, you're welcome to come up and try yourself out, but the reality is, do your best, and I'll probably extend you. But if I feel you're not really involved with it, then maybe you don't need to be here. If you're just here to fuck with people, maybe you don't need to be involved. Yeah. And I make that decision, and nobody else. So I take credit or blame, whatever you want to call it. If I think that you're got some kind of psychosis inside you, and you're here to drive my audience away, I'm going to protect my audience, Jack. You know, and I do that, and people respect me for that. I think there are times when I've asked people to get off the stage and shut off the power to them, and but right now, here's something that I want you to consider. This is the crux of this whole thing that I'm doing, and it's the most important thing to me. And I want to bring up the topic of music as a conversation.
Okay.
All right. Now, when you hear music, everybody says great music is a conversation. Okay? It's not a recitation. It's a conversation. When you and I are talking right now, I'm responding to your questions, and you're responding to things I'm saying to answer more questions. And that's what a conversation is. It's like give and take. I want music to do that. I want music to the most successful music, the most rewarding music, is not a recitation. It's not me going up and saying, look how good I can recite the Gettysburg Address, or look how good I can sound like Jimi Hendrix. Here's I'm playing the same licks that were played 58 years ago, note for note, and damn, you got to love me for that, you know? And that's not really a reason to love somebody. That's not art. That's a recitation. That's a, John Gielgud going up and delivering a Hamlet soliloquy. In a way, it's art. But in other ways, it is something you've heard before, and you can judge against other people who have done it. I prefer the honesty, the alive creation of back and forth dialogue. So what I've done is I've developed this technique of music, and I'd like to play one for you through the courtesy of the internet, called Audio Radiance for the Radio Audience. It was a work that I did with Frank Zelazny on electronic drums and me on various synthesizers. And it was done in a live format of he and I literally talking on our instruments to each other. Okay. And there's a back and forth there if you listen carefully. And there's also us playing with the formats of the instruments, where we don't stay too long. The only rule I have is to not play the same thing twice. Any phrase I play, I've got to keep changing it. It'll be the same as me saying the same sentence to you twice. That's not a conversation. That's not legitimate.
Right.
So I try to play something based on what I said previously. And sometimes, and then I try to answer questions from Frank on the drums, and he answers my rhythms with his rhythms. And we get into conversations. So we developed this song. It's about 18 minutes long. And it's a conversational piece. And I call it Audio Radiance for the radio audience, meaning the listener. And but I have other pieces like that there are pieces that are pretty good, and some of them that are pretty droll and unimaginative. But it depends on my mood at the moment, and it depends on Frank and how good he's drumming that day, and how good I'm playing that day. There are times when we droll on to tired conversation, like, what do you think of the Braves' chances of winning the series this year? Those kind of questions, that's really not a great conversation. Talking about quantum physics and how it's going to change our world, or digital technologies, that's postulations. That's, good stuff. That's, what do you talk about? What motivates us, besides sex? Freud. Those things, intelligent conversation is what I'm trying for, and something that sparks imagination, makes you laugh or makes you cry or whatever. I like to do the gamut. I like to challenge people, and myself included. As a people, I feel I'm a people, and and I'm having fun.
It sounds to me that you're attracted to a more free flow form of creativity.
Right. I'm looking at an investigation on how my brain works. I don't know how your brain works, but I know mine, because that's the only brain I got.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to encourage other people to expose their brains, and you could do that musically. I have a saying that says, music is how we will talk in heaven. It's if you watch movies like Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, they talk through music with the spaceship. Remember the little pattern that they were doing together, and that's music is a language, if it's a language, then let's go. Let's go with it. Let's use it as a language. It's pure thought in some ways, you know? And it can be translated into any place around the world. Any person listening to it can understand what I'm trying to say in some ways. And they don't have to know English to do it. One of the ways I judge silent films is how few cards they have to put up. You know, where they explain the dialogue.
Yeah.
The cards that tell you what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
A really good silent film will have a minimal amount of cards to explain the dialogue. You
Right.
will see the action and emotion and the emotions on the faces of the characters. They don't need cards that much, you know, because they're using the art of the film to express all that, you know, the art of emotion, seeing a face, you know, and what we glean from a face is amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, you know, I love film too, by the way. One of my favorites is 8.5 by Fellini,
Okay.
which is also addresses the act of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And how Fellini basically did it as an autobiography of what it's like to keep coming up with new material that hasn't been seen before, and
Right.
the pressures that he's feeling, and all of the things that are going on around him, and he's got to focus on his film, and yet there's all these pretty girls smiling at him, and guys offering him drinks, and he's got to come up with a scene that people are going to remember, you know, visual, and he's got all these temptations to not do it, and so it's that. I think that is the act of creation. Is like, how do we deal with distractions? How do we focus so that we come up with something distinctive that's never been done? You know, all of
Yeah.
that. That's been all the way through.
Yeah.
All the way through civilization, all the way through my life, all the way through your life. We are always our own worst enemies. And what you see is self editing, the object of editing. Like when I write, I generally throw away the first 2 paragraphs and and then go from there, because I'm just warming up, you know? And it's the same like when you see musicians playing, they'll play for 20 minutes backstage and then come out, you know? Because you're just warming up. And that's the problem with open mics, is because you got 3 songs, 15 minutes. That's not even a decent warm-up. Hell, that's not even enough time to tune your instrument. You know what I mean? You got to play with your instrument and get it going, and then you've got to get this tempered effect going, where the instrument has to be in tune to itself, okay? Like a tempered piano. It's got to be, it's not enough to just be 440 technically. It's got to be feeling right in your hands, okay? So that each chord will ring, you know, or the note in your horn will ring with the band, okay? The band has got to get into this thing and be a great ear. You have to hear the ring. A chord, a real chord in tune will ring. It will resonate onto itself, and when the whole band is in tune with each other, that effect is multiplied yet again, and so that's that's the key to me is you know, how do you got to take time for the band to kind of coalesce, or whoever's in the ensemble, whatever you want to call it. So it's an effort. It's an effort, and we don't give ourselves enough time. You know, we don't. That's the problem with
that's
time.
That's becoming
The problem,
more and more.
yeah, it'd be nice if we could have an open mic where people were allowed to warm up backstage and then come out. Maybe we could do something like that. A warm open mic. I don't know what to call it. But, yeah.
So you mentioned before that one, we could say it's a goal of yours, is to give people gateways to some creativity without drugs, without any of that.
Yeah, drugs kill people.
Yeah.
And-
so if you
and
wouldn't mind going into your philosophy and everything on that, be interested.
Well, I knew a lot of people back my age, when I was 20, that I thought, holy cow, there's no way this guy can't make it into the pro music world. He's so pro. His ear is so perfect. His prose is so great. He's as good as, and this is as good as anything Bob Dylan has done, good as anything Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton has ever done. This guy is a monster. And 2 weeks later, or 2 years later, he's dead. Yeah. And I know, I see faces in front of me right now that I remember, guys that will forever be 23 years old in my mind.
Yeah.
And they should be as old as me. And it's painful. It's fucking painful.
So do you feel with your open mic and the things that you've done, that you've been able to...
Open mics are all we got left. There's nowhere else for a musician or a person who wants to be a musician to do it. You got to be in front of an audience. You have to know the audience experience and how the audience works. And the audience in an open mic is other musicians. So every musician wants to be positive. As positive as you could be. You forgive other people immediately for being missing a cue, or for being off tune a little bit, or for forgetting a word, or that's not the problem, because we all have experienced that on stage. Everyone. So in fact you identify with it. Yeah. And there are some acts out there that I remember seeing acts as a child, people walking high wires in a circus. And they come out, and one of the first things they do is they slip and almost fall off the wire. And then the rest of the show, they go through, and it's perfect. It's perfect. And I realized, holy cow, what that slippage did was remind you that what they're doing is dangerous. And everybody in the audience goes, oh! It's like, oh shit, they're gonna fall. I'm gonna watch this poor son of a bitch die. And he grabs onto the wire at the last minute with his left hand, and he pulls himself back, and he gets back up again, and the applause is tumultuous. And then you go through and by the end of the show, you're really enthralled that this guy managed to live through his whole act. But then as you get older, you realize that little slip there, that was planned. That was choreographed. Okay? And so what it's done is it gives you the whole idea of danger that you're seeing. One of the things I remember seeing was rock musicians coming out on stage to play and opening up a bottle of Jim Beam and taking a big long hit. And by the end of the show, in 2 hours later, not even that, an hour and a half, maybe an hour and a quarter later, they emptied that bottle of Jim Beam into their throat. They were drinking it all the way through. After every song, they took a swig. And I'm going, how come that son of a bitch is not dead? And it dawned on me, maybe that Jim Beam is really iced tea. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's just a reminder of you to show you that it's just iced. I'm putting my life on the line for you here. Just like falling off the high wire. It's like, hey, look at how high I have to get to play for you.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. You don't know how high he is, you know.
Mm.
And the reality is, if he drank a quart of Jim Beam in that time, he'd probably be passed out or vomiting. No human being could do that quickly. That's just way too quick to live through night after night, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, it's happening again and again tells me it was a stage act. It was part of the act, okay? And, you know, specifically I'm talking, of course, about Keith Richards. So.
Okay.
But he was famous, but there were so many others that, you know, that faked it too, you know. And there were others that really did it, you know. Jimi Hendrix, I'm sure, really did a lot of psychoactive drugs of all kinds. And people around him thought, hey, he's immaculate, you know. I think Jimmy had a whole lot going on that was wrong for him. And he was not immaculate. He was just a human being that bought his own publicity. And he should be here with us today, but he isn't. But yeah, I value lucidity. I value rational thought. And I tell people, Jesus, you know, I seen guys like the guys that I weep for today that used to take dope all the time. Like the first thing they thought of in the morning was, how could I score today?
Yeah.
And when you find yourself thinking that, you really need help. You know, the problem is you got to spend 90% of your time lucid, and so that when you do enjoy yourself with some alcohol or some marijuana or whatever your poison is, that you know it's valuable to you. It has meaning. It's not the norm anymore, and you can enjoy it as a holiday. Okay, something out of the norm that's allowing you to free flow of ideas. You know, the story goes, you know, you create stoned and then edit straight. So that'll tell you what really works and what doesn't. You got to edit, like a great editor in any journalist will tell you. You got to edit.
Yeah.
So not everything you come out with is golden. You waste a lot of time. You know, I try to be concise and get it done with. Say, if I have to say something, I don't want to say it twice.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I choose the pattern that I do with not repeating myself on the music.
Right.
That's part of the format. Okay.
Do you feel like, being that your music is so free flow that it can almost be cumulative?
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
one piece is the result of all the pieces that came before?
There, you can easily blend it into one long... Technically, I could go forever. What I'm doing is I'm using the computer and the new technology to orchestrate. I'm orchestrating in a live format. It's like if Beethoven or Bach or Brahms was alive today with the current technology, they would get it done a lot quicker. and you know, I'm just trying to just look at pure human thought and look at suggestions from Frankie and from myself, you know, and that's how we talk. We play with ideas and elaborate on those ideas. And it's the same process as getting words out from inside of you. You know, it's how ideas are formed. And I'm using the computer to give a form transfer that form into something that I can communicate to somebody else. So I'm not the world's best musician. I don't know a lot of music. I know what I like, but technically, I'm not a good musician. I wasn't lying when I told you musicians consider me a comic. And comics think I'm a farting ice hole. Yeah, I've said that before, and I'll have to say it again.
So what music influences you?
I like everything that came up when my testosterone was being formed. When I was 14 and 15 and 16, those are the strongest years. And what I was listening to stays with me forever, you know? And I'm sure I'd be playing accordion today if I was in Poland in 1842, you know?
Uh-huh.
So, music is just a culmination of ideas, if you will, of everything we've ever heard. Mm-hmm. It's a synthesis of what, and so you'll hear it, you know, in what we just played, technically.
Yeah. Right.
And it's all ideas coming to my head, and the computer allows us to change formats. You know, used to be you had Jimi Hendrix was orchestrating. You know, he had a bunch of buttons on the floor, and he had an amp that he could stretch. It was very elastic. And he knew how to get crazy, wacky sounds out of his guitar and out of those floor buttons and out of that amp. And those three things he used to orchestrate music. And he could play stuff that Bach and Brahms were trying to orchestrate using string sections. He could do that, you know. And today I have a computer that gives a whole string section. And the newer computers are giving backgrounds now.
Yeah.
They're doing little tinkly noises that I'm not playing, and they're doing arpeggios that I'm not playing. I'm holding down a chord, and the computer's going, and I'm not doing that. The computer's doing that. I'm just telling it what notes are in that stretch of chord. And it's automatically setting in the timing structure that it has created. And I'm playing with the timing structure. I can speed up that timing structure. I can change that chord, and I can slow down the timing structure and do all those things, and you'll hear it. You know, that's what you just heard, technically.
Right.
Me just orchestrating, playing with knobs on a computer, and you know, I would be a crazy musician if I could do that live from the actual string section. You know, I'm not a string quartet, but I can sound like one. You know, Chuck Berry could play a horn section on his guitar. That's a horn section.
Yeah.
And he's doing it on guitar. and you know, he saved a lot of money on musicians.
Right.
But that's what rock and roll was.
Yeah.
You know.
And he was, just before him was Jump Blues, which was a horn section.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're right. That's I like that.
Electric guitar is as loud as a freaking horn section.
Yeah.
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 So that's where it comes from. You're playing with standard formats, but you're using newer technologies to expand what one man can do, you know? One man can kill a whole audience, you know? Climb up into a hotel room, knock out a couple of windows, and use automatic fire and spray it into a whole country and western audience. And, you know, and so it's the power of one person. If he really wants to fuck with you, you know. So technology is expanding the powers of the individual. You know, one guy blew up a building in Oklahoma City and killed a bunch of people because of his madness. You know,
right.
And he was out to stop society. He hated society. Probably because he saw himself as a failure. And society needs to figure out, how are we going to keep, now that one guy can do this to us, how do we keep that guy from doing it to us? And maybe we need to stop making people think like they're failures. And maybe that'll do it. Maybe we need to embrace everyone and keep that power from being used against us. You know, we've got to accept everybody from some way or another and protect each other, just like the herd protects against the raptor.
Right.
So we're back to where we started.
Yeah. We do callbacks on this show. It's not a problem. Some of what we're talking about I don't know how much it fits in, but it reminds me of this story. I don't know if you listen to Zappa much, but there's a story where there was a riot at one of his concerts. This is the original Mothers, probably 1967 or 8. A riot breaks out at his show, and he turns to his band and directs them to play the ugliest notes they could play.
The Beatles did that too, you know. They played the distinct chords. They just fucked with each other. Like, I'll play this mishmash on my fingers, and you play something else, and then we'll use this to start the song. You know, and they did that. Somebody took a long time to figure out what the Beatles played, the opening chord to Hard Day's Night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can find whole stories on YouTube on what they think the opening chord was. and it was just guys, at the time, they were just slamming their fingers against their instruments and saying, what does this sound like against that? And people do that with timings, and they do that with, you know, it's just, what happens to your brain when it's exposed to this texture, you know? There's also, when you experiment, you take risks. And people, you know, that whole 60s mentality of whatever you can do it for the sake of doing it, that also led to the rise of Charlie Manson, you know? And other things that went on that should not have existed. People that get soaked into their own delusional world. And you got to be aware of that. That's why I keep telling people, don't take drugs constantly. Drugs need to be a vacation for your mind. They don't. If you're never on vacation, you know, you could like your favorite food. Let's say is cream puffs.
Okay.
A delicious dessert indeed.
Right.
But if somebody fed you cream puffs 3 times a day, every day, and that's all you ate, you'd look at that plate and say, not another fucking cream puff.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'd get to that point. I can't eat another one. And so, you know, you got to keep a good diet. You got to keep a good brain. Your brain has to function. You know, when something bad happens and you find yourself in a car barrel rolling down Route 22 at 88 miles an hour, you know, you got to say, what am I going to do now? You know, you got to fight for yourself. And you know, it's... The reality is very real. It's, you know, you got to be in a protected scenario if you want to play with creative drugs, and you got to keep them as a creation and not as a casual thing. You know, that's how I look at it. You know, if the worst thing in the world is to masturbate on drugs, because you'll never want to unmasturbate. Masturbation, to me, it twists your mind, and I'm seeing a lot of people lose their sexuality because they're too damn busy masturbating.
Okay.
And
now, for the sake of the recording, you're speaking literally.
Literally.
Okay.
I'm talking about the dangers of fucking yourself up with an overdose of sexuality.
Okay.
And I'm seeing it, of course, in myself. I've got to be honest. I'm not, but I'm seeing it with a lot of people that no longer want to get together with other people because it's easier to just freaking masturbate. Okay. And there's a lot of people that are saying, they're walking away from relationships with people that love them because it's easier just to masturbate. And that's not right. You got to focus on working together with your wife or your husband or whatever. And you got to focus on, not just pleasing yourself sexually. You got to understand all of humanity. You got to understand, and that should come from your significant other or how many others you choose to have. But, like I said, if you find yourself getting up in the morning and the first thing you say to yourself is how do I score today? If you find yourself getting up in the morning and saying, well, what porno site should I go to today? That's not good. A little bit is good. A whole lot more is not necessarily a whole lot better. A little bit of water will keep you alive. A whole lot of water will fucking drown you, Jack.
Right. So would you put, not to interrupt you, would you put porn and masturbation in a similar category
as
that you
drugs?
Talk about drugs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is a drug. Masturbation is a drug. And you don't want to get used to it. Because you want to devote that energy to your lover, not to your hand.
Right.
So, it's important that we get along with each other. It's important because we're not going to stay civilized. Streaming porn is a whole other level. And I'm glad I wasn't 18 when streaming porn came out. I didn't have that.
Right.
And streaming porn, you go to the next porn site. Oh, if you like this, will you like that? And it'll get you further and further into the abyss. And pretty soon you're masturbating to girls licking peanut butter off the inside of their armpit, and you don't know why.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm trying to be funny, but I'm in a way I'm serious.
I understand what you mean.
And masturbation turns into like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Right.
Because it's an endless road, and it's not good. It makes you antisocial. Yeah. So. And it's something that society needs to address. Too much porn is not good. And we need to come up with a technology that says, hey, Jack, that's a good word for them, too. Yeah. You got to stop this. This is like your 4th hour straight here. You've been on this site, when are you going to eat? When are you going to sleep, But, there's no, how could I say this? There's no advertisements on the porn site. So what they're mining is they're mining your mind. What they're harvesting is your predilections. They know exactly what got you off because it's the last thing you saw that got you off.
Right. Yeah.
So they know what triggers you at your orgasm, and they know how often you go after it. Right. And how much energy you spend, and they know your name, because they know your website or your computer site.
Yeah.
So they know your name. They can match that up, and they know what gets most Americans off, what gets most Pennsylvanians off. Well, it's a grand social experiment.
Yeah.
And it's a craziness that we're delving into insanity now. You look at the history of the Roman Empire and the history of the Greeks, and how they went nuts, literally.
Yeah.
You know? But you're really involved with history. You know that once civilization started, people got crazier and crazier. You know what surprises me is when I was growing up, I used to think that the world was wonderful, and only people that were back in the 50s, only people that were totally ill-equipped for society got divorced. And then all of a sudden, half the people I knew got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And why did that happen? And it was because women no longer were told you don't have to tolerate your husband coming home drunk and beating the piss out of you.
Right.
You know? And it used to be that if a marriage failed, it was the woman's fault. And that changed in the 50s and 60s. And so there were a lot of things that were moving around. And today, you know, we have this huge rise in like sexual identity, gender identity, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's the product of streaming porn. And I don't see anybody offering me an alternative to that.
Right.
You know, human sexuality has been with us forever. And technologies are allowing us to sidestep it in other ways.
Yeah.
And, you know, back when I was a kid, if you wanted to date a girl, you know, you had to go through the steps.
Yeah.
And you would, when I was a teenager, you had to date a girl for like 6 months before you could cop a feel of her breast. That was a big event. Now, you know, you're seeing people fucking, and there's probably 10-year-old kids seeing that, you know, because you can't stop a 10-year-old once they learn how to use the net.
Right.
And
that's very true.
You're seeing all kinds of lusts and perversions, and they're growing up with it, you know. And one of the things that amazes me was, you know, there's this thing in Ecclesiastes saying nothing new is under the sun. And I remember being young and thinking, you know, I'm glad we don't live in the days of old when women were raped. And I'm finding out that my age, people in their 60s and 70s, a lot of them now are telling me, you know, when I was 16, when I was 12, my uncle or my so-and-so raped me, or my brother raped me. And I'm like, I know about 8 people that told me I was raped by somebody in my family. They're my age. And when I was young back then, I had no idea that was occurring.
Right.
I thought rape was something that just happened to other people.
It wasn't talked about.
Right.
When it did happen.
And now I'm learning, and a lot of people are carrying that through in their life now. And I'm going, wow, that is crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You know, it's just, we've got to do something, though. Technology changes are creating Frankensteins, you know. I call my music, my meeting with Frankie Zelazny, I call it Dr. Frankenbill.
Okay.
Out of respect to Dr. Frankenstein, who created something that eventually killed him.
Right.
The monster, his own creation killed him. And there's an element of that in society, you know. We've created the atomic bomb, you know, we've created streaming porn. Now how do we deal with it? You know? So, you know, we gotta figure out how we can live with each other now. We've got, as herd animals, we've created weapons that can kill us at incredibly fast rates. We can kill our neighbors, you know? 100-round machine pistols and, bombs that just go on forever, and nuclear weapons that emit radiation that just kills all living things and leaves the machines behind. Fuck. We keep coming up with new ways to kill each other.
Yeah.
But we don't come up with new ways to keep each other alive. Well, medicine's supposed to do that, but, and thought patterns, hopefully our thought patterns will do that too. We got to keep positive.
Yeah.
But boy, oh boy, there's just a whole lot of negative out there too.
Yeah.
We got to overcome the negative. We're all going through this world looking at what's going on. And it's the phenomenon I call the streaker phenomenon. Okay. If you're in like a room with 20 people and suddenly the light went out and the light went on again and somebody ran through the room from one door to another. Mm-hmm. And then you sit there and you'd say, then they hand out a piece of paper and say, that person that just ran through the room, describe them. What color was their hair? How tall were they? What was their weight? What color shoes do they have on? All the details. You saw them for 3 seconds as they ran through the room. What do you remember? No one person is going to give a full description. But the whole room, when you combine all the descriptions, you're going to get a lot closer to the actual description. When you combine all of the vantage points, the viewpoints of all the 20 people.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying for us is when we compare what's going on in this world, when you combine the effects of all of us together, you're going to get much closer to the truth of the observation than you will from just my observation and your observation. They kind of blend into one solid truth. So we got to look at the group experience to figure out what the fuck is going on with this world.
I think that's a very good point to land on.
Okay. We'll call it a day.
Yeah, no, we got a good amount of stuff.
Or we can call it a midday for that matter. Yes.
But yeah, thank you for doing this, Bill. I appreciate it.
Definitely, pal.
folks, thanks for listening to another episode of the Planet Shivers Podcast, and a big thank you to Bill Medei for coming on the show. You could find this episode and a whole lot more episodes on all major podcast platforms. What does that mean? That means Spotify, iTunes, the podcast app, Spotify, Soundcloud, and a whole lot more, plus YouTube. You could find the podcast with video. However you want to find it, it's there for you to check out. This was a great episode. Bill and I covered a lot of ground. Hopefully we'll be able to get Bill back on again. In the meantime, a lot of great guests coming up and a lot of news on what I've been up to. So don't miss the next couple episodes. I'm going to be changing my methods a little bit, doing some experimenting. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to share it with you all. Until the next time, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else.